The impossible stand. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was usually a quiet zone of space, home to nothing more than mining drones and automated research stations. Today, however, the lone ship drifted silently among the slowly tumbling rocks. The U.S. Defiance, a heavy cruiser bearing the scars of recent battles, was the last remaining vessel of Earth's outer defense fleet. Its scared hull told the story of the past 3 weeks, a desperate running battle against an alien force that had appeared without warning at the edge of the solar system. Captain Elena Reyes stood at the center of the bridge, her tall frame rigid with tension despite her exhaustion. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, but her gaze remained sharp as she studied the tactical display. Her uniform, though clean, showed signs of hasty mending. The Defiance had been running, fighting, and hiding for 23 days straight. Of the original fleet of 18 ships that had engaged the alien force, only the Defiance remained. Status report. Rise ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of command. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi looked up from his sensor station. No sign of pursuit, Captain. I think we lost them in the asteroid field. His fingers danced across the controls, searching for any hint of the enemy ships that had decimated their fleet. Don't count on it, Rise replied. The Xarathi don't give up that easily. They're out there somewhere. Chief Engineer Valerie Chen's voice came over the comm system. Engineering to bridge. The reactor cooling system is finally back online, Captain. We've got main power restored to all decks. Good work, Chief, Rise acknowledged. At least something was going right. The bridge crew worked in focused silence. Besides Reyes and Takahashi, there was Weapons Officer Jackson at his station, his dark skin glistening with sweat as he ran diagnostics on their depleted weapon systems. Communications Specialist Patel monitored the long-range channels, listening for any transmissions from Earth or the enemy. Navigator Wright plotted possible escape routes through the asteroid field, though they all knew running wasn't a solution anymore. The silence was broken by a sudden alert from Takahashi's station. His back straightened as he studied the readings. Captain, multiple hyperspace signatures detected. They're big, very big. Reyes moved to his station, studying the readings herself. Her expression remained calm, but her heart raced. How many? Takahashi's voice was barely audible. 137 distinct signatures. It's an armada, Captain. The bridge fell silent. 137 ships against one damaged cruiser. There was no running this time. Put it on the main display, Rise ordered. The tactical screen filled with red dots, each representing an enemy vessel. They were arranged in the Xarathi's signature attack formation, a 3-dimensional sphere designed to close in from all directions. They found us, Jackson said unnecessarily. Rise nodded, already calculating their options. They could try to hide deeper in the asteroid field, but the Xarathi's advanced sensors would find them eventually. They could make a run for Earth, but that would only lead the Armada directly to their homeworld. Earth's remaining defenses were already stretched thin, protecting the planet itself. Captain, Patel called from her station. We're receiving a transmission from the lead Xarathi vessel. On screen, Rise ordered, straightening her uniform jacket. The main view screen changed to show a Xarathi commander. Like all of their species, it had iridescent green-black skin and 4 glowing red eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. When it spoke, the ship's computer translated its clicks and whistles into English. Human vessel. The alien's voice sounded almost mechanical through the translator. You have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender your ship, and we may allow your crew to live as study specimens. Refuse, and we will reduce your vessel to atoms. Rise looked around at her crew. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They all knew what was at stake. What the Xarathi commander didn't know was that the Defiance wasn't just another human warship. 6 months before the invasion, Earth's military scientists had developed an experimental defense system called Aegis. The system was designed to create a quantum energy field around a ship that could absorb and store enemy weapons fire. Early tests had been disastrous. The first 3 prototype vessels had been destroyed when their Aegis systems overloaded. But desperate times had called for desperate measures, and the Defiance had been hastily equipped with the 4th prototype just days before the Xerathi appeared. They hadn't used it yet. The power requirements were enormous, and the risks were high. But now, facing an enemy fleet that outnumbered them more than 100 to 1, Reyes knew it was time. She pressed a button on her command chair, opening a channel to all decks. All hands, this is the captain speaking. By now you all know what we're facing. The Xerathi have brought their main fleet, and they believe they have us cornered. She paused, letting her words sink in. But they don't know what this ship can do. They don't know about Aegis, and most importantly, they don't know the courage of this crew. Reyes stood up, her voice growing stronger. We are the last line of defense between these aliens and Earth. Behind us are our homes, our families, everything we've ever known. I won't lie to you. What we're about to do is dangerous. But I believe in this ship, I believe in this crew, and I believe that today we're going to show that they should never have attacked humanity. She turned to Chen. Chief, begin power-up sequence for the Aegis system. Yes, Captain, Chen replied, her fingers already moving across her console. Diverting power now. Reyes turned back to Patel. Send our response to the Xerathi commander. Ready, Captain. Reyes smiled grimly. Tell them, we do not surrender. Come and learn why humans are not to be underestimated. The message was sent, and for a moment everything was quiet. Then space around the Defiance lit up as dozens of Xerathi ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams of electric blue and sickly green streaked through the darkness of space, all converging on the lone human vessel. The crew braced themselves, many closing their eyes, expecting these moments to be their last. But Captain Reyes kept her gaze fixed on the view screen, watching as the deadly barrage approached. Deep within the ship, the experimental Aegis system activated. At first, there was only a low hum that vibrated through the deck plates. Then the sound grew until it filled every corridor and compartment. The scared hull of the Defiance began to glow with a soft golden light. Aegis system powering up, Chen reported, her voice tense with concentration. Power levels rising. 30%, 50%, 70%. The enemy fire struck the Defiance, but instead of tearing through the hull, something extraordinary happened. The golden glow intensified, and the energy beams seemed to sink into the ship's armor. Where they hit, the golden light pulsed and swirled like living things. Takahashi stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. Captain, the ship is absorbing the enemy fire, all of it. Reyes nodded, though even she was surprised by how well the system was working. During testing, they had only managed to absorb the fire from 2 or 3 weapons at once. Now they were taking fire from dozens of ships simultaneously, and the Aegis system was handling it all. The temperature on the bridge began to rise as the environmental systems struggled to handle the heat generated by the absorbed energy. Warning lights flashed across every console, but the ship held together. Engineering report. Reyes called out, steadying herself as the ship shuddered under another wave of enemy fire. Chen's fingers danced across her controls, making constant adjustments. The Aegis system is performing beyond all predictions, Captain. It's like it's learning, adapting to the enemy weapons. Power absorption is at 175% of maximum rated capacity and still climbing. On the main view screen, they could see the Xerathi fleet had stopped firing. The alien ships hung in space, seemingly confused by what they were witnessing. No one had ever survived such a massive attack before, let alone absorbed it. Sir, Patel called out, we're picking up transmissions between the Xerathi ships. They're trying to figure out what's happening. They sound afraid. Reyes allowed herself a small smile. Fear was good. Fear meant the aliens were starting to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The Defiance now glowed like a golden star, its hull crackling with absorbed energy. The power readings were off the scale, far beyond anything the scientists who designed the system had thought possible. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as systems struggled to contain the massive amount of energy. Hull temperature reaching critical levels, Takahashi reported, his voice rising. If we take much more, we'll start to melt. Rais knew it was time. They couldn't absorb any more energy, but they could use what they had gathered. Jackson, is the weapons system integrated with Aegis? Jackson nodded, his hands already moving over his controls. Yes, Captain. The system is giving me targeting solutions for every ship in the enemy fleet. We can hit them all at once if we want to. That was another surprise. The Aegis system was supposed to only be able to target a few ships at a time, but somehow it seemed to be adapting, growing stronger, becoming more than its designers had intended. Captain, Chen called out, her voice urgent. The power levels are becoming unstable. We need to release the energy soon, or the system might overload. Ray stood from her chair, her decision made. Target their command ships first, then work your way out to the smaller vessels. Fire when ready. Jackson took a deep breath, then pressed the firing control. The Defiance shuddered, and for a moment everything went quiet. Then the ship released its stored energy in a massive burst of golden fire. The blast split into dozens of smaller beams, each one carrying the power of multiple nuclear weapons. The Exarethi ships tried to evade, but the targeting was perfect. The first beam struck their lead ship, cutting through its shields like they weren't even there. The massive vessel exploded in a ball of plasma that lit up space brighter than any sun. More beams followed, each finding its target. Exarethi ships exploded one after another, their own weapons fire turned against them with devastating effect. The Phoenix Gambit. The immediate aftermath of the battle left the Defiance floating amid the wreckage of dozens of Exarethi warships. The glow of the Aegis system had faded, leaving the ship's hull scorched and blackened in places where the absorbed energy had nearly melted through. Inside, the crew worked frantically to repair critical systems and stabilize the experimental defense system that had just saved their lives. Captain Rice stood in the engineering section, watching as Chief Engineer Chen and her team worked on the Aegis core. The cylindrical device pulsed with residual energy, occasional sparks dancing across its surface. Can it be repaired? Rice asked, her voice low. Chen wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a streak of grime across her forehead. It's not a question of repair, Captain. The system wasn't damaged, it evolved. The core reconfigured itself during the battle. It's not the same system anymore. Rice raised an eyebrow. Evolved. What does that mean for us? It means, Chen replied, checking a diagnostic screen, that Aegis is now capable of far more than its designers intended. But it also means we're in uncharted territory. I can't guarantee how it will behave next time we use it. Rice nodded grimly. There would be a next time. They both knew it. The Exarethi wouldn't give up after one defeat, no matter how spectacular. Back on the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Takahashi had grim news. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting another hyperspace disturbance. It's massive, even bigger than the last fleet. Rice studied the sensor data, her heart sinking. The readings showed at least 200 Exarethi warships approaching, nearly twice the size of the fleet they had just defeated. And the Defiance was in no condition for another battle of that magnitude. How long do we have? She asked. They'll be here in 4 hours, Takahashi replied. 4 hours to prepare for a battle they couldn't possibly win, not in the conventional sense. But Captain Alina Reyes hadn't survived this long by thinking conventionally. Call the senior staff to the tactical room, she ordered. We need a plan. 10 minutes later, the senior officers of the Defiance gathered around the tactical table in the ship's conference room. The holographic display showed their position in the asteroid belt and the approaching Exarethi Armada. We can't fight them directly. Rise began without preamble. Even with Aegis, the ship won't survive another full-scale engagement in its current condition. We need something else, something unexpected. Jackson, the weapons officer, leaned forward. What if we don't wait for them to attack us? What if we attack them while they're still in hyperspace? The room fell silent. Attacking ships in hyperspace was considered impossible and suicidal even to attempt. Explain, Rice said. Jackson gestured to the tactical display. The Aegis system didn't just absorb energy. It somehow learned to redirect it with impossible precision. What if we use that ability to disrupt the Xerathi hyperspace corridor? We could create a quantum resonance pulse calibrated to the exact frequency of their drives. Chief Engineer Chen's eyes widened. A hyperspace destabilization. That's never been done before. The energy requirements would be enormous. We have enormous energy, Jackson replied. Aegis is still holding most of what it absorbed from the last battle. Rice considered the idea. It was wildly dangerous, not just for the Xerathi, but for the Defiance as well. Disrupting hyperspace could have unpredictable consequences. Ships could be thrown off course, destroyed, or even lost in spacetime. But they were out of options. We'll call it the Phoenix Gambit, Rice decided. Chief, how quickly can you reconfigure Aegis to generate a quantum resonance pulse? Chen ran calculations on her tablet. 3 hours, maybe less if we bypass safety protocols. Do it, Rice ordered, and get me everything you can on Xerathi hyperspace signatures. We'll only get one shot at this. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Every member of the crew had a role to play, from engineering teams reconfiguring the Aegis system to science officers analyzing Xerathi hyperspace patterns. Even the ship's AI was pushed to its limits, running millions of simulations to calculate the precise frequency needed to disrupt the alien fleet. With 30 minutes remaining before the Xerathi arrival, the Defiance moved to a new position deeper in the asteroid belt. The largest asteroids would help amplify the resonance pulse when it was fired. Final diagnostics complete. Chen reported from engineering. The Phoenix Gambit is ready, Captain. But I should warn you, this will completely drain the Aegis system. We won't have any defensive capabilities left if this doesn't work. Understood, Rice replied. All hands, secure for possible spatial distortion. This could get rough. Throughout the ship, crew members secured loose equipment and strapped themselves into acceleration couches. Nobody knew exactly what would happen when they fired the pulse, but everyone understood the stakes. Xerathi fleet approaching hyperspace exit point, Takahashi announced. 20 seconds to re-entry. Rice took a deep breath. Target the center of their hyperspace corridor. Fire on my mark. The ship hummed as the Aegis system powered up one last time, the golden glow returning to the hull, but with a different pattern now. Rippling waves of energy that flowed from bow to stern and back again. 10 seconds. Takahashi counted down. We can see the hyperspace distortion forming. On the view screen, space itself seemed to twist and fold as the massive Xerathi fleet prepared to emerge into normal space. The first few ships were becoming visible, their hulls partially materializing. 5 seconds. 4, 3, fire, Rice commanded. Jackson activated the pulse. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the Defiance released all its stored energy in a single perfectly tuned burst. The golden pulse expanded outward, invisible to the naked eye, but devastating at the quantum level. It struck the hyperspace corridor, just as the Xerathi ships were emerging. The effect was both immediate and catastrophic. The corridor collapsed, twisting in ways that defied the laws of physics. Xerathi ships caught half in and half out of hyperspace were torn apart, their hulls twisting in impossible geometries before exploding in spectacular fashion. The bridge crew watched in awe as the mighty alien fleet was ripped to shreds, not by conventional weapons, but by the very fabric of spacetime itself. Ships that managed to fully emerge from hyperspace were thrown off course, colliding with each other or nearby asteroids in a cascade of destruction. The Defiance shuddered violently as the pulse's aftereffects washed over it. Systems failed across the ship, and for a moment it seemed like they had pushed their luck too far. But the tough vessel held together, proving once again why it had been chosen for the experimental Aegis system. When the chaos finally ended, the space around them was empty except for debris and the few Exarethi ships that had managed to escape the destruction. Those survivors were already fleeing at maximum speed, clearly terrified by what they had witnessed. "Damage report," Rice called out, straightening in her chair. "The Aegis system is completely drained," Chen reported. "Most primary systems are offline. We're running on emergency power and life support is at minimum levels. But we're still here, Captain." Rice nodded, surveying her weary but triumphant crew. "Communications, as soon as you can establish contact with Earth, send them a full report. Tell them the Phoenix has risen, and the Exarethi have learned to fear its fire." 2 weeks later, the Defiance limped into Earth orbit, escorted by a flotilla of smaller vessels sent to protect the ship that had single-handedly turned the tide of the war. As they approached the orbital docks, Captain Rice stood at the viewport, watching Earth grow larger. The Exarethi invasion had been halted. The destruction of 2 entire fleets had sent shockwaves through the alien hierarchy. Intelligence reports indicated that they were pulling back to reassess their strategy, giving humanity precious time to prepare. More importantly, the data gathered from the evolved Aegis system was already being used to develop new defensive technologies. The next generation of Earth ships would be far more formidable than anything that had come before. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi joined her at the viewport. "They're calling you the Phoenix Captain now," he said with a smile. "The woman who rose from the ashes of defeat to save humanity." Rice shook her head. "It wasn't me. It was this ship, this crew. We all did this together." Takahashi nodded, but his expression turned serious. "The Exarethi will be back, won't they?" "Yes," Rice replied, her gaze fixed on the blue planet before them. "But next time, we'll be ready, and they'll find that humanity is not so easily conquered." As the Defiance docked at Earth's orbital station, news of their arrival spread across the planet. The lone ship that had stood against an alien armada, and one had become a symbol of hope, a phoenix that had risen from the ashes of Earth's darkest hour to lead humanity toward a future among the stars. The Exarethi had sent an armada to crush humanity. One ship had sent them running, and the legend of the Defiance was just beginning.